So the best way to describe Marvel's Avengers is that it's a Jekyll and Hyde kind of game. What's up, guys? Veteran Gamer here, and I recently just finished my playthrough of Marvel's Avengers, a game that I deliberately skipped over because I knew that at launch, specifically on the last gen consoles, there was going to be issues. And being a big Marvel fan, I decided to hold out and wait for the official next gen version before tipping my toes into it. And as stated earlier, this game is a Jekyll and Hyde. There's basically a single player campaign that has points in it that you can be played multiplayer cooperatively. And then there's the RPG co-op side of things. And one part is good, one part is just utter trash. But before we get into it, being on a next-gen platform, let's talk performance. There's two graphical choices to choose from. You have the graphical mode and the performance mode. The graphical mode actually runs native 4K, 30 frames per second. The fidelity settings are dialed up, more specifically the particle effects as well as overall destruction, while the performance mode reduces the resolution to a dynamic 4K, removes some of the fidelity settings as well as the destruction elements in favor of a locked 60 frames per second. In my opinion, throughout my playthrough, I actually, even though I'm a frames per second kind of guy, I elected to play this game for the most part in the graphical mode. I mean, there's just that big of a difference between the visuals. When you play it in graphic mode and you see the amount of particle effects and destruction that you can lay waste versus how it is in the performance mode, I mean, it is very noticeable. On top of this, because this is like a beat 'em up and not a shooter, personally, I was okay with playing it at 30 frames. In most cases, I would choose the frame rate, but I couldn't give up the graphics and the sheer particle effects that came with playing it in graphical mode. On top of that, one of the best benefits of waiting and playing it on a next-gen console was the load times. I know that the load times were atrocious on the last-gen consoles, hitting upwards of a minute for a load time. Thankfully, if you're playing on a PS5 and subsequently an Xbox Series X, the load times are less than 5 seconds. No joke. Like, you're in and out in 5 seconds, which is fantastic. One of the things I want to say about this game in particular is that although the graphics are incredible, throughout my entire playthrough, I couldn't shake this feeling that this was an MCU ripoff. When I played Spider-Man on PS4, even though they changed Peter Parker's face afterwards, that Peter Parker didn't feel like a Tom Holland ripoff. Whereas in this game, everything about it just feels like Square Enix didn't want to pay for the likeness and voices of the actors, and they basically brought their own people in, but everything about it feels like the MCU, and that they just cheaped out on that. But I digress. I still enjoyed the presentation overall. So let's get to the Jekyll and Hyde. The Jackal part of it is the single player campaign. The single player campaign in this game is absolutely fantastic. You do go through all the characters. You get to play as all the characters. Each character plays differently, which is great. Like Iron Man shouldn't play like the Hulk and shouldn't play like Black Widow, which is terrific. That they all play differently and have their own skill sets. The only issue with it is the mission structure. Even when you play with companions, the AI is pretty stupid, and that when they have you playing like a domination and holding 3 different sites, it's kind of hard with dumb companions. If you're playing with friends, it's a little bit easier, but if not, it's annoying. Another issue I had with the campaign is while the abilities of each character is fantastic, the cooldowns to use said abilities is ridiculously long. And because of this, it kind of makes it unfortunate. On top of this, the leveling is ridiculously slow. Like, you will not come close to maxing out a character throughout your campaign playthrough. Aside from this, the story is fantastic. It does have its own neat plot twists, which are nice. From a campaign standpoint, it's thoroughly enjoyable. But now let's get to the Hyde part. The Hyde part about Marvel's Avengers, and that's really, really trash, is the whole RPG aspect. I mean, the loot is one of the worst loot systems I've ever seen. Not only do you get more powerful, and yes, I equipped it because the levels for the campaign required the extra power. There's no cosmetic changes. No piece of gear changes your character cosmetically. So not only does it not fit the MCU or the Marvel Universe, because Thor's not going to put on a piece of armor. He doesn't need to. But it doesn't change the look. The only way to change your appearance is through grinding for in-game currency to unlock it, or spending real-world money. And that's how you change the look, which is kind of ridiculous, because when you play other looter shooters or loot-based games, one of the cool things is when you get to the end game and you're able to get gear sets, that people can look at your gear set and be like, oh, this person's got this or this person's got that. There's no point in that. Like, the loot you get, you don't see. The upgrades you get, you don't see. It doesn't change the look of your character. You have to either grind an in-game currency or spend money to change the look of your character. On top of this, there's also, each character has a battle pass, so to speak, for cosmetics only. Again, another way to monetize. It doesn't fit a loot-based game, plain and simple. Even after you finish the game, the end-game content is a joke. It's like you're doing a bunch of Destiny strikes. It's fun with friends, but even then, this game, the RPG side of it really, really sucks. Plain and simple. They even have factions for you to grind, which builds reputation to get more gear. But again, none of this matters when the gear, although makes you stronger, doesn't change your look. The grind in this game is ridiculous. So, this is why I say that Marvel's Avengers is a Jekyll and Hyde. If you are a big Marvel fan and you are looking to play this game, play it for the single player campaign. The campaign is really good, but once you're done with the campaign, you're done. Don't play this for a loot-based game. Don't play this for the co-op aspect. Realistically speaking, there are much better games for that. This is, at best, a good single-player game. They should have never bothered with the loot and just made it a single-player campaign. So in my opinion, as a big Marvel fan, a lot of the issues were fixed by the time I played it, so I had a good experience. I'm personally willing to give Marvel's Avengers a 7 out of 10. Just be mindful that you're playing it for the single-player campaign and not the multiplayer. I'm Veteran Gamer, and I hope to see you guys next time.